Hey everybody, this is Deanna Kosaraju, founder of Global Tech Women. Welcome back to Voices 2015, the week where we celebrate the accomplishments of amazing women in tech around the world. And I am here to introduce the next session, which is career boosting tips for millennials. An important topic because millennials are the future for women in technology. And we have Jessica Johnson here from Salesforce.com, and I have to say that Salesforce is the official CRM of Global Tech Women because that is what I use on a daily basis. So really happy to have representation from Salesforce.com. And so a couple things you need to know. We have a chat window over here on the right-hand side where you can ask questions, you can introduce yourself, make comments, but you do have to be logged into Spreecast in order to do that. So if you're here as a visitor, you won't be able to use the chat, but you can email me at deanna@globaltechwomen.com or tweet us at #voices2015, and I'll make sure that your questions, comments get sent to Jessica. And then secondly, we have a PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to load that up right now, I think. There we go. Okay, so you should see that. So you can drag and drop this PowerPoint anywhere on the screen you would like. There's 15 slides here, so Jessica's going to let us know what slide number she's on so we can follow along with her using that little right arrow button. So with that, I'm going to go away and leave this to Jessica, and I will be back later.
Awesome. Thanks, Deanna. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining me today. This is a topic that I feel really passionate about and that I'm really happy to share with you all. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. As Deanna mentioned, I work for Salesforce, and as you can see on my slide deck, it's branded with Salesforce. I love Salesforce. It's an amazing company with amazing products, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about Salesforce if you're interested. I'm actually not going to be talking about Salesforce at all during my presentation, except for the fact that I work there. So feel free to message me. My contact information is here on this first slide, and then it's also on the last slide if you would like to talk about Salesforce. So today I am going to talk about my personal story and my journey working in technology and some of the advice that I've given over the years that have really helped me develop my career and I think make really big strides where I've had really great opportunities present themselves. So I think this advice is good for you if you're 10 years into your career or if you just started and you're just out of college. So I'm going to start off with slide number 2, which is basically my story. So I'm born and raised from Salt Lake City, Utah, and I went to college at Boston University. While I was there, I studied photojournalism and psychology, and of course all the other great things that Boston University has to offer, but I really focused on media and sharing stories and telling stories. I graduated in 2009, and I worked really, really hard to finish actually before my peers, but what that meant was I actually graduated, or finished classes rather, 6 months ahead of my peers, and found myself done with school in December of 2008, which is basically when the economy imploded, and I had a really hard time finding a job. So I moved from Boston to Salt Lake City, back to my hometown, in January of 2009 in order to support my then fiance at the time. And I was done with classes, so I needed something to do. I needed to find a job or some internship or something basically to get me going in my career. And it was really difficult. It was a really hard time to find a job. So I ended up getting a job as a nanny because I needed to pay off those student loans. And I got really lucky in that the woman who I was a nanny to decided at the time to leave her executive job at a large tech company to start her own consulting firm. So she told me that she would teach me as I was running her kids to and from swimming lessons and playing Kung Fu Master and handling all the laundry. She would teach me how to become a consultant and about the subject matter expertise of business continuity and disaster recovery, which is what the consulting firm consulted on. And I took every opportunity I could with her, and within 3 years, I was actually running the consulting firm, marketing operations, and then consulting Fortune 100 companies on business continuity and disaster recovery as well. So it was a really big leap for me to go from changing diapers to sitting in boardrooms and talking about long-term strategies for ensuring continuity of critical business processes. And I attribute a lot of that success to the really great advice I get. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is slide 3. And this is how I've basically divided up the presentation to provide you with what I hope to be is the most bang for your buck in terms of the information I'm providing you today. So I'm going to start off talking about mentors and sponsors, and then I'm going to talk about some areas that I would recommend to focus on if you're looking to get ahead, and then finally end with some practical tips. So let's start with mentors and sponsors. I am now on slide number 4. So these are definitions that I actually wrote and spent a lot of time writing, choosing very specific words. I'm sure if you were to Google it, you would find something very similar. So to me, a mentor is someone who is typically further along in their career, but not necessarily. A mentor can also be a peer or somebody who's maybe in a different vertical or in a different position as you, but not necessarily further along, and who can give you candid advice about a situation, obstacle, opportunity, or issue that you're dealing with. And you know, it's really important to have mentors because they're often going to give you different perspectives, and it helps if they are further along in their career and they've had similar paths, because they're going to be able, you know, they've seen a lot more, and they're going to be able to give you some really great advice for how they've handled it and how what they learned as a result of how they handled the same situation or obstacle. And the important thing to know, too, though, is that, you know, everybody has their own story. Everybody has their own advice. And sometimes advice for mentors is suitable and sometimes it's not. I had a mentor once who loved to say that opinions are like belly buttons. Everybody has one. So that's why it's always beneficial to have lots of mentors and to really seek advice from many different people who you would consider somebody to be in a mentorship role for you. And also really important that they are open and honest with you and can actually give you candid advice. I think that's really difficult to find sometimes, and somebody who would who will tell you the information that may be hard to tell you, you know, you messed up in that situation, or in order to get out of it, you're going to have to do something different that's going to be uncomfortable or feel painful for you. So candid advice is a huge part of finding really good quality mentors. So I know everyone has heard this advice. This is something that everyone always says is, you know, get mentors. But oftentimes they don't necessarily tell you the best ways to get those mentors. So that's what I'm going to talk about next, and that is slide 5. So how does somebody get a mentor? First, you actually have to identify people who you think would be really good at providing you that candid advice and who you think has either been there before or will be able to offer you a perspective that you may not necessarily be considering or thinking about. Next, you have to ask. And I know this is really uncomfortable. This is the most uncomfortable part for me. And I think it's the most uncomfortable part for other people. But you have to put yourself out there, and you have to reach out, and you have to ask them. If you have a question, if you have a need, if you want to have a conversation, you need to be the aggressive person to approach them and ask them for their time, ask them for their attention. The same token, to be able to really leverage an effective mentor, you need to be conscientious of their time as well, because most people who you view as potentially being a really good mentor probably is a really busy person with a lot going on. So you want to be conscientious of their time, and you also don't necessarily want to take it personal if you approach somebody and, you know, they don't necessarily, or they aren't really able to make time for you, or they kind of blow it off. So it's important to ask, and then it's important to not take it personally if they don't. And, you know, provide them with the context of what you're dealing with. So, you know, a lot of my mentors I ask to coffee, or I try to catch at the beginning or the end of meetings, or if I see them running out to grab lunch, I'll try to run and grab lunch with them. It's about being able to leverage their time effectively, or if you know that they're going to a specific happy hour, or you know they like to grab coffee at a certain place, putting yourself out there and saying, hey, let's go to Starbucks together, or, you know, next Tuesday, do you have free time to just step out and go for a quick 10-minute walk? I have an issue that I'm dealing with that I'd really love to get some advice on. So then once you actually do get their time, it's so important to be specific with what you're looking for. I've heard, I think Sheryl Sandberg said that she's had, people come up to her and say, hey, can you be my mentor? It's kind of like walking up to somebody and saying, hey, will you be my friend? It doesn't really work that way. It's a relationship that develops based on, seeking out advice, targeted advice from somebody, and that person being able to really understand your situation, provide you, targeted feedback, and then nurturing that relationship. So you got to start with specific questions. You can't just go up to somebody and say, hey, will you be my mentor? What I recommend is focus on a specific problem or obstacle that you're facing. So for example, let's say you've been on a development team or you're a developer, and you really want to make that next leap to become a Scrum Master or to become a manager. And you want to achieve this, within the next 2 years. Rather than going to a mentor and saying, I want to become a manager, how do I do that? That's a really broad question, and you may get a good answer back or you may not. So the more specific you can be, the better. In this scenario, you could go to, either your potential manager or a manager of another team and say, hey, I've been in this role for 5 years. I really want to make the next leap and become a Scrum Master sometime over the next 2 years. I know you've done this before. I know you're familiar with my work. What are the top 3 things I should be focusing on for the next 6 months to enable me to be in a position where I could then apply for that role? What are the top 3 things I need to do? Do I need to be focused on getting certified? Do I need to be taking classes? Should I be job shadowing someone? Asking very, very specific questions is going to give you the advice and direction that's going to help you the most. So we move on to the next slide, 6. And after you get that advice, it's so important to follow up with them. Like I said, mentorships are like friendships. So if you go and you just ask for advice once, you're not really going to develop a great mentorship relationship. So you got to go, you got to be specific, you got to ask for their time, you got to be conscientious when you have it, you got to be specific in the asks. And then after the fact, you got to follow up with them. Again, ask them to coffee, hassle them in the elevator, tell them what happened, whether or not you applied, maybe you didn't apply their advice, that's okay. What happened? What did you learn? And then continue to follow up with them on guidance. Ask them, okay, I got certified. What's the next thing I should be focusing on? And really, constantly be checking in on that relationship if you want that mentorship to grow. Okay, I'm going to move on to sponsors. So, slide 7. A sponsor is someone who is influential in their organization. They're typically aware of opportunities before most of their colleagues, and they're really the ones who are going to help champion you to get into those opportunities. Again, this is a definition that I wrote, so you may find something similar or different if you Google it. I'm going to move on to slide 8. The most important thing to know about sponsors is they hear about these opportunities, and in order for them to really think of you for this opportunity, they need to be able to vouch for the quality of your work as well as your work ethic. So it's so important that sponsors are familiar with you and your working self and your work ethic and the great work that you've done. So if you're speaking to someone who you think may be a potential sponsor, you should really be focused on trying to highlight, the good work that you've been doing, your work contributions, as well as being open and honest with them about the challenges you've faced and the lessons that you've learned. Because there's no such thing as a perfect employee. Every project has problems. Every project has challenges. All work, all tasks have wins and have losses. And not unless that sponsor can get a full package of who you are and, the great things that you bring to the table, they're not really going to be able to help leverage you into those opportunities. So slide 9, how are mentors and sponsors different, and how are they the same? So a mentor can certainly be a sponsor. And in fact, some of the best sponsors are mentors because they're going to be the ones who know you the most and who really know the situation that you're in and how you're hoping to develop in your career. Both mentors and sponsors, the best relationships are ones that you continue to develop over time. You got to keep asking for the time. You got to keep using it wisely. And, start small. You don't have to go and ask them to have a long lunch with you. Take coffee breaks. Ask them to go for a 10-minute walk. If you see them going to a meeting, walk with them to their meeting, especially if it's at another building or on the other side of the building. You've got to take each opportunity you get. One of the best opportunities that was presented to me was actually a colleague of mine who I viewed as a sponsor who stopped by to say hi and then was taking the bus home. So I actually walked with him from the office to the bus, and that's when I learned of a really great opportunity. So take every opportunity that you're given. And it's so important to be specific with your asks. The more specific you are about the opportunities you're pursuing, the obstacles that you're facing, the better rather, the advice and the opportunities that are going to come your way. So before I move on to my next topic, I do want to say if you have any questions now about mentors and sponsors, I'm happy to answer them. I know Jan is going to post questions at the top. If those come in, I will pause. If not, I will keep on going. Okay. Go on to the next subject. And of course, any questions I'm also happy to answer at the end. So I am now on slide 10. Okay, so slide 10, getting ahead. I put this here because I think it's important to pause and recognize that you can't get ahead unless you really understand where you're at today. And it can often be really difficult to understand how well you're doing at your job. And certainly you have a perspective, but the perspective of everybody else around you also matters pretty, consequentially as well, whether or not you're going to be able to get ahead. And I love this adage because it's an adage that I remind myself almost every single day, and that is that the reward for good work is always more work. So if you are a good way to know whether you're, doing really good work is if you keep on getting more of it. If you find that you're overwhelmed with requests and feedback and people wanting to talk to you, and you're getting requests that seem a little bit outside of your wheelhouse, but are kind of related, that means you're doing a really excellent job, and keep doing what you're doing. If you are not necessarily, you find that you have a lot of empty or spare time, or some of your job responsibilities or tasks are being cut back, maybe this is an opportunity to focus on some of these next practical tips. And there's also programs about how to get feedback in most companies. Salesforce is actually really amazing with getting folks to provide feedback to each other. But get feedback. So whether or not you have a plate full of work and you're finding yourself working long hours, or whether you're getting the feedback, you always need to know where you're at in order to be able to figure out a plan to how to move forward to the next phase. So getting ahead, slide 11. The first one is that I think it's so easy, when I was a consultant, this was certainly easy to go into different companies and be able to pinpoint and see all the different problems that they were dealing with. And the most important thing is that, nothing's perfect. No process is perfect. No project is perfect. No product is perfect. And you're often going to run across, these imperfections. And it's important to understand and see those, but it's also really important to be active in the solution. Be part of the solution. Nobody likes a naysayer. Everybody likes somebody who's there to chip in and help, because there's always something to be done. There's always ways to improve. And oftentimes it just requires some energy and competency. So really focus on being part of the solution. Next, learn how to take and how to give criticism. And this is something that, I think everybody needs to work on since the time they're in elementary school until the time that they, are grandparents. This is something that applies to everybody. But if you can really learn how to take and how to give criticism, it's going to make a really dramatic difference in your career. And I think, you may think of some folks in your organization, typically these are at VP or higher levels, that handle this so well, where they provide constructive criticism to a team or to people, and And they don't even, the people who received it didn't even realize they were getting it. So there's certainly ways in which to do this. And I would say, a way to focus on getting ahead is to really try to train and learn how to take and give criticism. Next, and this one's a bit of a kicker, and it's to take the work that no one wants. This is a really quick and easy way to get ahead because, one, there's no competition, and two, if you can master something that nobody else wants, you will constantly be turned to and sought out for that work. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to do that type of work forever, and that's not what I'm recommending. I'm saying that it's often a quick and easy way to get ahead. And usually it's because it's difficult work. It's not usually the fun stuff that everybody wants to do. That's really easy. And finally, be patient, be a teacher. As a millennial, you're going to come in, you'll most likely find yourself in situations where you pick up software or a technology much more quickly than some of your colleagues who are a little bit older. And it's so important to be patient for things that you excel at and to be a teacher for things that you excel at as well, or things that you understand. If you are, so for example, let's say you're really great at using PowerPoint. That's a really great thing to be known for, and that's to be competent in either a skill set or a specific product or technology. And people will then start seeking you out if you make it a regular thing to teach people and to make yourself available. And I think that's really important because that's also how you build influence in an organization, and that is, being known for being kind, being known for being part of the solution, and learning how to give and take criticism, and then also taking the time to be a teacher. If somebody needs help with something, not just giving them a fish, but teaching them how to fish, so to speak. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, which are some of my practical tips. So, practical tips. The first is, and this was something that I really struggled with early on in my career, especially in consulting, because I was often the youngest one in the room, and that is that age is only an issue if you make it an issue. I think when you're younger, it's very easy to be self-conscious of the fact that you're substantially younger than most of the other people in the room, and I promise you that nobody else views it that way except for you. Now, what they do view is a lack of experience or a lack of maturity, which often is correlated with age, but not necessarily. So if you are conscientious of your age, don't be. If you are conscientious of lack of experience or lack of maturity, that's okay. As long as you can make up for, by being aware and by striving to not necessarily overcompensate for that by overspeaking or pointing it out. One thing that I do have to say about age in particular is if you have coworkers or colleagues who are close to or around the same age as your parents, don't bring it up. Don't point out that they are the same age as your parent. Don't point out that they have the same trends or clothes or hobbies or whatever might have it. Generally, if you're a millennial, talking to coworkers about your parents is a strange thing to do, unless it's something totally contextual, like, hey, your spouse is a doctor. My father also practices medicine. I understand what it's like to have to, work long hours at a hospital. Right? That's a contextual thing. Other than that, don't bring up age. Don't necessarily talk about your parents. It just makes it weird. Next is leave your mobile phone out of sight. I think younger people get a really bad reputation for always being glued to their phone. Which is funny because if you look at older people, they're always glued to their phone as well. And unless, of course, it's your job. So my job, I'm on call all the time, so I do always have my phone out. However, it's always on silent, and I don't look at it or pay attention to it when I'm in a meeting. So keep your mobile phone out of sight. In fact, when I was a consultant and I would go on site about a week a month, I made a point that my clients never saw my mobile phone. because when I was there, it was really important for me to be mentally present while I was physically present and to be able to exemplify and show that to them. So actually, to check my emails and text messages, I would go into the bathroom, and I'd actually go into a bathroom stall and text message from there to let my friends know, what time to meet them for dinner. So, and I think that that's really important, because being mentally present and being able to show people through, eye contact and not looking at the clock and not looking at your phone, not looking at your computer, you're typing away at your computer, even worse, really shows and gives people the respect and the engagement that they're looking for. And you're going to find that you're going to become much more effective at communicating and building relationships and engaging with people if you really focus on just physically showing how attentive you are to them at that time. And a huge part of that is keeping your mobile phone away. Next is a little bit on that thread, and that's always carry a notebook. So if you run into your mentor or your sponsor or your boss or someone else in the elevator and you ask, hey, how's that project going along? And they say, oh, great question. I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Will you put something on my calendar at noon? Pull out your notebook, write it down, remind yourself. Or maybe you're walking to coffee and they're giving you really great ideas or listing books that you should be reading or resources or providing you a laundry list of information. You should be focused on writing it down. Oftentimes, writing things down for me is more of how I move it from my short-term memory to my long-term memory. But the act of writing something down and really is also showing engagement and that you're caring about the information that person is giving you. And not only that, but it makes it look like you're busy. So even if you're just running to the bathroom or you're just running to the kitchen to grab a cup of coffee, carrying a notebook shows that you're engaged, you're ready, you're paying attention, or maybe somebody thinks you're running off to a meeting, you're busy, right? You got lots of work, because the reward for good work is always more work. It just provides the perception that I think you want people to think of you, which is that you're busy, you're on top of it, you don't forget information, you don't drop things, and so it's always great. It's a really easy thing to do, which is just carrying a notebook. And the last one I'm going to talk about on practical tips is how you dress matters. And I know this can be a little bit of a controversial subject. So what I want to say about this is that it's important to make sure that you are dressed appropriately for your job. And it never hurts to put in extra effort to make sure that the clothes that you are wearing are ironed and lint-free, and fit you in a way that's appropriate. Obviously, if you are at a tech startup and everybody's in jeans and hoodies, don't show up wearing a suit. That's weird. It'll make you stick out. People will notice, probably not in a positive way. So I'm not giving you that advice. And likewise, if you work for a large bank and everybody's showing up in suits, it's weird to show up in jeans and a t-shirt, right? So you have to wear attire that's appropriate for your job. If you are, if you work in IT provisioning and you have to clean out, or you're in facilities and you have to take apart servers or unplug and plug in, you have to deal with old equipment, wearing a suit or wearing really nice clothes is probably not appropriate. But if you have to attend a lot of executive meetings, then, you have to wear clothes that are on par with that as well. So it has to be appropriate for your job. It has to be appropriate for the context of your team. It has to be appropriate for the context of your company. And then it also, an industry, right? There are certain norms in tech. There are certain norms in finance. And most importantly, you certainly need to feel comfortable as well. If you are wearing clothes that you are really uncomfortable in, it's going to show, and then people don't understand why you're uncomfortable, and maybe they think it's them. So you need to be comfortable. That's really important. And, I think the most important thing to take away from, the whole how you dress matters is that the way that you dress is going to non-verbally communicate to people how they, who you are. And unfortunately, we're very, aesthetic people, and people make snap judgments based on what they see, based on the cover of the book. And it's a nonverbal way to communicate to people around you how they should treat you. So even if you're wearing jeans and a t-shirt, you can still be well polished and signal to people that, you take yourself seriously, you take your job seriously, you take time to make sure that you show up to work polished. And that can dramatically change the way that other people, especially in your company, respond to you. And of course, you see them every day. It's got to be on a consistent basis. So making sure you take the time in the morning that you're not wearing wrinkled clothes, or that you do a lint roller, or that there isn't a hole, or it doesn't smell funny, whatever. Those are really basic things, but there's certainly an opportunity to go above and beyond. And a lot of formal clothes, taking the time to invest in some nicer formal clothes certainly never hurts. Okay, so I'm going to move on to slide 13. I wanted to share with you some resources that I've used, that I have found to be helpful for me in my career, and getting ahead and kind of understanding the different things that are going on in my industry. So first is books. There are 2 books that I live and die by, and that they are How to Win Friends and Influence People and Emotional Intelligence. So How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie is a classic. If you haven't read it, I really hope that you pick it up and read it. Lots of salespeople actually read it annually. They will go back and they will reread it every day. And I promise you, if you were to read that book and to apply, 1, 2, 3 things that Dale Carnegie recommends, it will dramatically impact the way, in a very positive way, your career and even your personal life. So read it. If you've read it already, reread it again. It's always a great refresher just to remind yourself, how to engage with people and how to connect with people, because getting ahead in work is often about connecting with people. And next is Emotional Intelligence. So this is a little bit more dense. It's a little bit hard to get through, but it is well worth it. You spend so much time in college and getting certifications and becoming technical, and that's very important to your job, and everybody understands that, and everybody knows that and communicates it, and some companies pay for training and education. But something that is definitely lacking is the development of emotional intelligence. And you can't get ahead unless you have emotional intelligence. Or maybe you can, but it's going to be much more difficult, and it's going to be maybe not as fun. So if you can develop your emotional intelligence, you're going to be able to see dramatic impact in your career and also in your personal life as well. If you have read it, again, refresher, always great. Next, and this is just because I love TED Talks, they're short, they're informative, they're entertaining, they tell fantastic stories, they cover any and all industries, and it's just a good way to continue to be curious about the world around you and engage in different things, especially things that you may not necessarily have thought you were interested in. I recently watched one on physics, and that's not my forte. So, be curious. These are really short snippets when you're on your commute or you're making, dinner, getting ready for the day. It never hurts to just pop on TED and pick a random one at choice and learn something new. And finally, I would say, get involved in your community. Obviously, taking part in this conference and dialing in today is a really big deal, and you're doing something to basically help move your career forward and to help network and get involved. It's so important to get involved in the community. And not only that, but everybody's unique and has something to offer. And it's really fantastic if you can go to, you can get involved by going to a soup kitchen and serving food. That's a great way to get involved in your community. It's also a really great way to get involved in your community if you can leverage a skill set and expertise that you already have, that you engage with on a daily basis. So I personally am very involved with Iridescence Technovation Challenge. It is a 13-week program where girls middle school to university age develop an app that solves a problem in their community, and they write a business plan for how that app would be viable, and then they actually pitch it as if they were pitching to future investors. And it's just an unbelievably amazing program. There's different ways to get involved. You can be a mentor, you can be a judge, you can be a sponsor, you can just encourage girls to participate. I can't tell you how incredibly fun it is and how rewarding it is to get involved in that group and to get involved in something that you're passionate about. This is something I'm passionate about, and I can bring a very specific skill set because I am a woman in tech, to that organization. So I really encourage you guys, whether it's Technovation, whether it's Girls Who Code, whether it's your own program, whether it's encouraging your niece to do the hour of code, whatever that might be, get involved and use the skill set that you have, because it's going to go a really long way. Okay, so I'm going to open up to questions. I know I moved through things really fast here, and I believe this recording as well as the slides will be available afterwards. And I do have my contact information on the last slide, slide 15. And I do want to take some time in case if you guys have questions, or in case you want to network or talk about your own stories. Everybody, I think, has a really interesting journey about where they came from, where they are, and where they're going. And it's always insightful and fun to hear other people's stories. I think so.
Hi, Jessica. It's Deanna.
Okay. So, Deanna, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. One posted on the Facebook group and one for Global Tech Women. And I encourage all of you, as part of the community, to join the Global Tech Women group. We have almost 4,000 members there from around the world, and all different levels and all different types of industries. So it's really fascinating. So one of the questions I had over on the Facebook group was, Jessica, you seem really polished and know what you want and know what you're doing. This is a woman who's just looking for her first job. What are some of the things that you can recommend to her on how to look confident when she's looking for that first job?
That's a really great question. Thank you for the wonderful compliments. So there's actually a lot that you can do. So one is, obviously, I always recommend invest in a good suit, because when you go on interviews, or, invest in some nice outfits for your interviews. Take the time to really focus on your resume and on your cover letters, because that's your technological face before you could even get a job interview. And there's a lot of really great resources out there, both paid and free. And if you're still in college right now, they usually have career resource centers. Leverage those resources, because they're going to provide you with really great feedback. And, I'm actually at a time right now where I'm, curious about getting engaged or involved more with customers, but I don't necessarily know what that looks like or what that's going to be. So what I've done is that I've actually made connections with different people across, different subject matters or different disciplines and business units, and just started asking them what they do and why they like it and what the obstacles they're facing. So even if you don't know what it is that you want to do or where you want to go, just start asking people, because you're going to learn a lot more if people share their own experiences with you, and you're going to hear things that resonate or don't resonate. I had a coffee with somebody yesterday who talked about an internal position that she's trying to fill, and at first I thought, oh, that sounds like a really great job for me, and then the more she talked to me, I thought, oh, well, that sounds like a really great job, but maybe not for me. So as you're getting started, confidence is also a really hard thing to say. I'd say fake it till you make it. I was literally running from changing diapers to, putting on a suit and then going to a sales pitch. And I did not feel confident. Still smelling myself, nervous that I maybe smelled bad. You have something to give. And if you made it that far, or if somebody agreed, they see something in you, and you got to believe in yourself and do your power poses. So I don't know if you guys have seen this TED Talk. There's a TED Talk about power poses. Never hurts to go in the bathroom and do a 2-minute power pose to get that adrenaline up, so that when you do go in, you actually do feel a little bit more confident.
That's great. Thank you so much for that one. The last question that I have is about, and you alluded to this a little bit, so this is great. I think this leads right into what you were saying. This woman is trying to get on a project. She wants to be on it really bad, but she doesn't feel like she has enough experience, and feels like there's a lot of competition trying to get on this particular project. And so you just mentioned that you want to become more involved in the customer-facing aspects of your company. So, what are some of the tips and tricks? I'm putting you on the spot, to try to find ways to become visible for a millennial who really wants to get in on this great project.
Okay. So I'm going to start with this woman and her on the project that she wants to be on. So I will say, yes, if there is a lot of competition, it's generally trickier to get on these projects. I will say there's a flip side to that, and that is I have often been given opportunities that made no sense. I mean, I was changing diapers, and this woman said, "Hey, you could be a consultant, you could be a consultant," and a lot of that is because it has to go with your core, soft skills. So if you can highlight the skill set that you have rather than the experience, that can often give you a leg up into an opportunity. So, previously, I was consulting on disaster recovery business continuity. Now I handle incident communication. They're actually very separate and very different, but I was able to focus on, when I was trying to sell myself into this current role, I was able to focus on my ability to bring different teams together, my ability to provide executive updates, right? So it wasn't necessarily specific to the work that I was doing, but the skill set that I can bring. So if you can focus on the skill set to try to leverage yourself into a position, that can often help you if you lack the experience. And then if there's competition, that maybe looking for the spaces in the project where people don't want to do it. So maybe it's, the scheduling, or maybe it's handling a portion of the project that's potentially high risk. Raising your hand for the work that most people don't want can also help get you into that project. And if you don't get to the project, then try to get to the next best project. That's always a good way to go as well. Taking the time to develop relationships with the people on the project as well. That's going to help get you into the next project, because then they're going to think of you. Oh, hey, Jessica is really great at building PowerPoints. This next project, we're going to have to be doing a lot of those. We should try to get her involved next time when we kick those off. So developing those sponsors, right, where they're familiar with your work, they're familiar with your skill set, they're familiar with what you can bring to the table. Building those relationships, because then when an opportunity does arrive, they're actually going to think of you. And oftentimes you don't even know these opportunities are going to come up. So that's why it's so important to nurture those sponsorship relationships. In terms of getting visibility as a millennial, I'd say there's so much opportunity to develop niche expertise. And this is where I actually got ahead quite a bit. Business continuity and disaster recovery is already a very niche industry. And then I became really, really good at doing something called a business impact analysis. And that became even more niche, and to the point where anybody who ever wanted to do a business impact analysis always knew to call my company, and then I was the go-to person to be able to do that. So a recommendation that I would give for a millennial who's looking to get visibility is to find a niche area that you think, could help provide you with some visibility, and just take the time to become really good at it. You have the whole internet at your fingertips. It's so easy to learn information, to connect with people that are in that niche, and it's really easy to then, get on LinkedIn groups, to start web pages, to blog. Blogs are a really excellent way to try to get yourself some visibility, and the more niche the subject matter is, the more likely that you will be viewed then as a subject matter expert there, and that becoming a subject matter expert can often give you a lot more visibility as well. And don't be afraid. I fell into disaster recovery business continuity, and it chose it. I got lucky. It chose me. So just because you're like, oh, I'm not really passionate about that subject, or it's not something I want to be doing in 5 years. That's okay. You don't have to. Just focus on becoming really good at it over the course of the next year and see where it takes you from there, because it's going to open up a lot more doors if you just pursue it than if you just kind of say, oh, well, I'm not, it's not my passion, or I don't want to do it, indefinitely. You don't have to. Just focus on becoming really good at what you're doing now. I think that will help provide a lot of visibility.
All right. Well, I think that was our last question. I just was checking Twitter and our Facebook page. Really great advice for anyone, and a good refresher for a lot of us who probably knew some of this, but need to be reminded, because it's important that we look at our skill set and how we're trying to reach that next objective, that next cool project. And so it's great. I'm hoping, Jessica, that you will continue to be involved with Global Tech Women. I mean, we would love to hear your advice on a regular basis for our millennials, not just in the U.S., but around the world. I think you have a great method to the way you're approaching things, and I think a lot of young women would learn from it.
Awesome. Thanks, Deanna, and thanks everybody for joining. And please feel free to reach out to me if you have any additional questions or you'd like to connect.
Okay, everyone, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this session. So I hope that you will join us for our next session, which is from Rena Tawari from Cisco Systems, where she's going to talk about improving marketing productivity using big data. So we're going to go from internal to external. And so I hope that you will join us for that session, which will start in about 15 minutes. Thanks so much, Jessica.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.